this is really a great time to start a business. It's kind of counterintuitive, but in a difficult economy, you can have the opportunity to prove something and get off to a good start. That's harder to do almost when the economy is going well.
Welcome to another dynamic episode of Eliot Kelly TV, where we bring you the leading industry figures right in your home. My name's Eliot Kelly. I'm going to be your host, and today we have with us none other than Loren Feldman. He is the founder and editor-in-chief of 21 Hats, an online platform for business owners. Previously, he was the senior editor covering entrepreneurship at Inc., Forbes, and the New York Times. He's also the former call-in show host for Mind Your Business on Sirius XM. Welcome to Eliot Kelly TV.
Great to be here, Eliot. Thanks so much for having me.
Good stuff. Today, we're going to talk about the challenges and the opportunities for you as a podcaster and an entrepreneur. But before we do that, share with us your professional story.
Sure. I don't know where to start, but I wanted to be a sports writer when I was a kid and when I was in college, and I started off doing that, but I found out lots of other people wanted to be sports writers too, and it was slow moving. So I switched to covering business and really liked it because I felt there was something similar. I was always attracted to the people side of the stories, getting to know people. And I found business writing was more like sports writing than people realize. You keep score, the score is very important, and they're great people stories, but there aren't as many people who wanted to, or at least back then, there weren't as many people who wanted to do it. So I found my career advanced more quickly in business. And I started to really enjoy it, especially about 20 years ago when I went to Inc. magazine. I had done other kinds of business reporting before that, but at Inc., I discovered entrepreneurship. I got a business degree in college, and I don't think I ever even heard the word entrepreneurship. It wasn't the thing back then. My colleagues were trying to get jobs on Wall Street or with consulting firms, and people just didn't think about it. I went to Inc. and had my eyes opened, fell in love with the topic, fell in love with the people I was meeting, and kind of got committed to it. I had a great experience there, learned a tremendous amount, went to Forbes, learned more there, great experience, went to the New York Times, did different things at each place, learned more, but kept meeting more entrepreneurs and finding more great stories about people doing inspiring things, which is what really got me going.
Thank you for sharing that, Loren. What has been the greatest challenge for you in the industry?
Well, Eliot, that would probably be right now. I left Forbes about 2 years ago. At each of my stops, at Inc. and at the Times and at Forbes, I did things that I was proud of. I worked with really smart people and I learned a lot, but I never quite got to put it all together the way I thought was possible. I wanted to create a community where business owners could learn from each other. And I felt like at each of the big media companies I worked at, they did a different piece of it, but I was always too small a part of what they were doing to be a priority. And I never quite got it all the way. 2 years ago, I met somebody, we decided to partner and build the definitive platform called 21 Hats. And we got off to a great start. It was going really well. We started with a daily email newsletter. We added a weekly podcast. And I spent most of the fall of 2019 working with developers to design this platform that would combine content and community. unfortunately, then we ran into this pandemic thing, which kind of set us back a little bit. And my partner, it was my idea. My partner brought the money. He had an established business, actually several established businesses, great businesses. But like a lot of businesses, they were struggling during the pandemic, and he concluded he needed to focus on his core businesses. So in the fall, we, on very friendly terms, agreed to separate. I got ownership of the things that we had created, the email newsletter, the podcast, and the designs for a website that has not been built. And he got to focus on his core business, which is what he had to do. So I've gone from being a journalist to being something of an entrepreneur and trying to prove whether this idea I've had for about 10 years and believe deeply in can actually work. So that's my biggest challenge.
Thank you. The reason we brought you on, Loren, is because you have actually exemplified everything that we stand for here at Eliot Kelly TV. You've been able to bridge the gap between community and content very well. Your experiences have allowed you to, you've done so many interviews, and for you actually used to being on the other side of the interviewing as opposed to being interviewed. Tell us, what is 21 Hats all about? What is the actual mission for 21 Hats, and how can persons get in contact with you?
Thank you for asking. The mission is very simple. I've learned a lot over the last 20 years about what it takes to build a business. And what I've learned is that it's really hard, and nobody knows for sure what's going to work and what's not going to work. There are important lessons that can be learned, but every case is different. And, I remember being at a focus group conversation at Inc., where we were talking to business owners about what we could provide as a magazine that would really be helpful to business owners. And this one particular owner looked me in the eye and said, well, I'll tell you what I don't want. I don't want to be told how to run my business by some 24-year-old reporter who's working for a money-losing media company. And at first it sounded funny and I laughed, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized how important that message really was. We as journalists shouldn't be trying to tell people how to run their businesses. But what we can do is find businesses that are doing smart things, that are succeeding, that are trying different things, and share that information, and then let business owners learn from each other. And the content's important, but the community is equally important. I started a small business blog at the New York Times, where I realized that the posts that we published, I thought were really good. But the best part of the blog was the response we got in the content section from actual owners. And if we made a mistake, they would point it out. If we missed something important, they would point it out. Or sometimes, they would like what we wrote, but they would expand on it, or they would ask questions, and it turned into a conversation. That's the mission of 21 Hats, to try to recreate that in kind of a community, a safe space for business owners, where they can let their hair down, be themselves, talk about the real problems. And, there are a lot of sensitive topics like firing employees. Unfortunately, it's a fact of life. It has to happen. It's difficult to have that conversation in public. If you can have it among business owners who care about people, and nobody wants to have to fire someone, but sometimes it has to be done, and there are better ways to do it. Let's talk about it. That's the mission of 21 Hats. One of the things I'm proud of right now is the podcast that I've been doing, which I kind of lucked into. I started this before the crisis hit. I decided to start a podcast where I'd have a weekly conversation with the same group of 6 or 7 business owners every week. I would pick 3 of them each week, and we would talk about how they're doing, and I would track their progress and what's happening, what's working, what's not working. I wasn't sure how long we could stay with that same group of owners. It might get boring. How many challenges would they have? Then the pandemic hit, and suddenly we were following them through a real crisis. And it became very emotional at times. Of the 6 I started with, 2 of them were really fighting for their lives, really struggling to survive. 2 of them were doing pretty well, and 2 of them were probably doing better than they would have done without the pandemic. So every week we had these really sometimes emotional conversations about what they were trying, what was working, what wasn't working. And to me, that's what I'm trying to create in the 21 Hats brand. That's what I hope we will stand for.
What are the handles and how can we get in contact with you?
Thank you for asking. You can go to 21hats.com. And if you do, you will see a sign up right there for our daily email newsletter. It's largely aggregation. I try to find all the most important stories I can on the web each day, the things that matter most to business owners. And I highlight them in one place and send it to your inbox, along with the content that we produce at 21 Hats, which includes weekly webinars, the weekly podcast, and some other contributors that we're bringing on board as well. So that's the main place. You can find the 21 Hats podcast anywhere you get podcasts. Just search for that. Those are the main places.
Thank you, Loren. Knowing what you know now, is there anything you would have done differently in your professional life?
Well, I started in the journalism business before the internet got big. If I had known it was coming and how disruptive it was going to be, I might have chosen to be a lawyer or something. So that's part of the answer. I guess what I really would like to have done is do what I'm doing now sooner. It's hard to take that step. I was always in the position of working for a good company with lots of smart people. And, especially I got a mortgage and a couple of kids that had to be put through school. It was always hard to take the leap, even though I had this idea that I really believed in. I wish I had done this 10 years ago. I don't know for sure that it's going to work, but I'm really having a lot of fun, and I'm getting really strong feedback. I don't know if it's a real business yet. I don't know if the numbers are there to make it work, if I can reach enough people, but the feedback I'm getting keeps me going. That people are telling me that I'm giving them content of value to them, that it's making a difference to them. And that's what I want to hear. And that's what's keeping me going. I wish I had done it sooner.
Is there anyone you want to give a shout out to today, Loren?
I guess I would mention all the regulars on the 21 Hats podcast. These are owners who every week we sit down and have a conversation, sort of like what happens in a private peer group, like a Vistage group or EO, one of those organizations where people share really personal information that they know isn't going to leave that room. Well, I found these owners who are willing to have not the entire conversation, but a lot of it, more than you would expect, in public, so that other people can learn from the mistakes they've made and from the lessons that they've learned. So, if there's one in particular, there's a guy named Jay Goltz who runs a business in Chicago. He's actually got several businesses. One of them is the largest picture framing business in America. He also has a very successful home and garden store called Jason Home. I met Jay when I was at Inc., and no one has taught me more about what it really takes to run a business. And no one has been more generous about sharing that journey than he has. But there are lots of the others on the podcast. There's a woman named Dana White who has a chain of hair salons in Detroit that's been struggling and has talked very openly about wondering whether she would survive this pandemic. Things are going better for her now, happily. Paul Downs runs a business out of Philadelphia, a manufacturing business that makes custom conference tables for law firms and businesses and government offices. And he's having a tough time because, people aren't spending as much time in offices as they used to, and they don't know if they're going to still want an office when this is over. So he builds these really beautiful but expensive conference tables. His business is kind of up in the air right now, but he shares everything. And, I guess those are the people I would like to thank at this point.
Thank you. We alluded to the fact, Loren, that you've interviewed some of the most successful thought leaders in the industry. Can you share your most memorable one with us?
Oh, gosh. I don't think there's one most memorable one. The person I would mention, though, who I've interviewed a number of times and had the good fortune to spend a lot of time with, is a guy who's really a visionary. His name is Jack Stack. He's not as well known as he should be. He runs a business in Missouri called SRC. It stands for Springfield Remanufacturing Corporation. And about 40 years ago, it started because Jack was in charge of an International Harvester plant in Springfield, Missouri. That International Harvester was about to shut down. And he said, wait, don't shut it down. I'm going to take it over with these other guys who work with me, other laborers, and we're going to make this thing work. And they borrowed a bunch of money and they did it. And 40 years later, they have a business that does more than $600 million a year in revenue. And they did it with based on a couple of principles. One of them is called open book management, which, like Jack, is not as well known as it should be. The principle is, if you tell employees what really drives the business, what makes it work, they will be better employees, they will be more engaged, they will produce much better ideas, and they will be more invested in the business. They will help you in ways that you can't even imagine. They won't just go home and forget about it. They will live and die with your business. He also believes in employee ownership, and he made those people who was working with him and people who joined the company afterward actual partners of his. And as a result, he had people working on the front lines in a factory who retired 30 years later as millionaires. It's really an extraordinary story. So that, the business worked on its own terms. It worked for the employees who worked there. I think it's a model that this country should build on. We talk about this terrible divide between employers and employees. Most people hate their boss. A lot of people hate the place where they go to work. This model of engaging employees doesn't work everywhere, and it's not right for everybody, but when it works, it can really work great. And that's what Jack Stack demonstrated. And I'm always really delighted to have an opportunity to spend time with him.
Thank you. We both agree that the pandemic has affected our personal lives and businesses all around the world. Can you share with us 3 tips for thriving through the pandemic?
Wow. Well, tip number 1 is wear a mask and be careful. I've taken all of that to heart. I've barely left my house since last March. And I think, I think it's really important to take it all seriously. Unfortunately, that's not happening everywhere. But that said, it doesn't mean you have to shut everything down. And I actually think this is really a great time to start a business. It's kind of counterintuitive, but in a difficult economy, you can have the opportunity to prove something and get off to a good start. That's harder to do almost when the economy is going well. Things are cheaper, for example, during a down economy. But also, you get a chance to try things, see what works, get your ducks in a row, and be ready when the economy comes back, which it will, and be in a position to really operate at full strength at that point. I often think about this with my own venture. I told you about the partnership that I had and how we ran into the pandemic. It was heartbreaking at the time because I felt like we needed 3 more months. If we had had 3 months before the pandemic hit, we would have gotten that platform built. And I think the pandemic would have been the perfect opportunity for us to prove our value. If we weren't any use to businesses at that point, we were never going to be at use. We would have found out quickly that this was an idea that just didn't work, or we would have found out that it did work. And I'm still hopeful with what it's taking longer and I don't have the resources to do it as quickly as I hoped, but I'm building it step by step. And I still think that same principle applies. This is a difficult time and people are finding value in what we do because they need help right now. So I know people who view the weekly podcast we do as almost a therapy session. It's like business owners tend to feel isolated. They don't necessarily have someone they can talk to about all the stress that they feel and what they're going through. You can't really talk to your employees about it. You may not even be able to talk to your spouse about it because your spouse may not be able to handle that level of stress. And your spouse may not know what's really involved in running a business. The same thing for your friends. Well, here's a weekly conversation about people who do get it, who do know how tough it is to try to build a business. And, I think that's something that we can deliver right now in this difficult time. And I think that applies across the board. There are lots of other ventures and other businesses that it would make sense to try right now. So I think people should not be sitting back. They should not feel as though they have to wait until this thing is over. They should be careful. They should stay safe. But there are ways to try things right now. And I think not everybody realizes this is actually a great time to try it.
Thank you. What does the future hold for Loren Feldman?
Well, the next step in my evolution will be I have to figure out how to monetize what I'm doing. The plan was always to monetize the basic platform. The hope was that the daily newsletter and the podcast would attract people, would pull them into the platform. And on the platform, they would be encouraged to create a profile and pay us a subscription fee every month. Unfortunately, that platform doesn't exist. I've got to find another way to make money. I'm sort of exploring different options at the moment. I have some people who are interested in sponsoring both the newsletter and the podcast. So that may be one alternative. I also could start charging a subscription fee for the daily email. That's a possibility. Actually, at the moment, what I'm leaning toward is kind of a voluntary payment system. I have a feeling if I ask people just to subscribe and I put up a paywall, I've been led to believe that I would probably get at most 10% of my current free subscribers to convert to paid subscribers. I think I might be able to get that on a voluntary basis and still send the email to everybody else, and I hope continue to help more people. So my first baby step in this direction might be to ask for voluntary contributions, pay me a monthly subscription fee. That's the next big hurdle in my future, if that's what you were asking for.
Good stuff. Thank you so much. We wanted to obviously express our appreciation to you for taking time to be with us. We wish you every success to you and your team at 21 Hats. We do have a quote today. It's actually by Mr. Grant Cardone. Is what you have done is nothing compared to what you can do. Again, thank you for joining us, Mr. Loren Feldman, here on Eliot Kelly TV. You've been watching with Eliot Kelly TV. Never lose your passion.